The pale blue sands of the abandoned planet stretched endlessly under a harsh, sunless sky. Broken metal fragments and shards of once great buildings were scattered across the barren surface, forming jagged landscapes that caught the weak light in strange angles. In this desolate world moved Lyra, a small alien girl, her blind eyes hidden beneath faintly glowing ridges that marked her species. Her tendrils, long and thin, brushed against the debris as she walked, allowing her to sense her surroundings with precision far beyond ordinary sight. Every step was careful, measured, because she had learned the hard way that one misstep could be fatal. Lyra had lived on this planet for as long as she could remember. She was the last of her kind, a survivor of a forgotten war that had destroyed her people. She had no memory of her family, no one to guide her, and only fragments of the stories of her ancestors. Her world was one of scavenging and survival. She collected anything that might serve a purpose: old scraps of metal, shards of glass-like material, anything that could be chewed, burned, or reshaped into something useful. Each day was a challenge, and she approached it with the quiet determination that came from having no one else to rely on. Despite her blindness, Lyra had developed remarkable skill. Her tendrils could detect subtle vibrations in the ground, changes in temperature, and even faint traces of energy in abandoned machinery. She could distinguish between a piece of metal that was strong enough to be fashioned into a tool and a piece that would break the moment she tried to use it. She had an intuitive understanding of the planet, a silent communication with the ruins themselves, and yet even with her abilities she often went hungry. Much of what she found as food was barely edible. Strange mutated plants or spoiled protein she had learned to process into something digestible. On one particular day, Lyra moved carefully through the ruins of a once grand city. Towering metal frames twisted into impossible shapes rose from the sands, and broken screens flickered faintly with fading energy. Her tendrils brushed against the debris, sensing familiar patterns, the vibrations of hollow metal and traces of heat where small animals scuttled. She paused when she detected something unusual, a faint hum beneath a pile of twisted metal. Her tendrils reached carefully, probing, and she realized it was not a plant, not a piece of trash, but a small, sealed container. She pried it open and sniffed cautiously. Inside were small objects she could not recognize, smooth and glowing faintly. She tapped them, feeling the energy pulsing faintly beneath the surface. Lyra did not know what these things were. To her they were strange and beautiful, but of no practical use. She closed the container, leaving it carefully in the pile, and continued her search. Survival came first. As she rounded a collapsed archway, she suddenly sensed movement nearby. The vibrations were different, more organized, more deliberate than the random scurrying of small animals. She froze, her tendrils extended in all directions, sensing carefully. From the dust and metal emerged a figure unlike any she had seen before, a human. His movements were cautious, deliberate, and he seemed to be searching for something, carrying strange tools she had never encountered. He was tall and awkward, yet there was a grace to his motions, a sense of purpose. Lyra retreated silently, unsure of this newcomer. Humans were rare in this part of the galaxy, and stories of them reached her in fragments from old data cores. Explorers, scavengers, sometimes predators. She crouched low, keeping her tendrils stretched to sense every detail. The human stopped a few meters away, noticing something in the ruins. He crouched, his hands brushing against the sand and debris, carefully picking up scraps and examining them. Curiosity overcame caution. Lyra tilted her head slightly, trying to sense more about him. Unlike other scavengers she had encountered, this human seemed more careful, almost respectful of what he found. He did not toss things aside recklessly, nor did he make loud noises. Slowly, she extended a single tendril toward him, not to touch but to test if he would notice. The human looked up, sensing her presence almost instinctively. Their eyes met, Lyra's faint glowing ridges and his brown eyes. He froze, surprised, but did not retreat. Instead, he held up his hand, palm open in a gesture of peace. She felt the vibrations and energy from his hand, sensing no threat. For the first time in a long while, she felt curiosity instead of fear. He spoke, a strange series of sounds she could not fully understand. But then he activated a small device from his belt. Words appeared in a shimmering display, translating his speech into her language. "Hello," it read. "I don't mean to harm you. I'm looking for something important, and I think you might know the way." Lyra hesitated, Sensing the honesty in his vibrations, she stepped closer slowly, keeping her tendrils extended. The human did not flinch, did not make sudden moves. He continued, showing her objects he had collected. They glowed faintly with energy. "Do you know what these are?" he asked. Lyra shook her head. They were beautiful, strange, but meaningless to her. The human smiled, a small kind gesture. He tapped one of the objects and a faint hum emitted. He demonstrated a simple transformation. The object, which looked like a dull piece of metal, lit up with energy, enough to power a small device. Lyra's tendrils quivered with interest. "Treasure," the human said simply, pointing to the objects. "Not trash. You've been collecting treasure all along without knowing it." For a moment, Lyra could not comprehend. She had spent her life gathering scraps, food, and metal, thinking it was all that she could manage. The idea that these items held power, that they could do more than she imagined, was almost impossible to grasp. She reached out cautiously, touching one of the glowing objects. A vibration passed through her tendrils, and she realized he was right. These were not simple pieces of metal. They held energy, knowledge, and potential. The human introduced himself as Ethan, an explorer from a distant system. He explained that he traveled across planets finding remnants of lost civilizations. Many of the items Lyra considered trash were highly valuable components of technology her people had created centuries ago. Ethan showed her simple ways to activate them, harness their energy, and use them to improve her daily life. He was patient, explaining slowly, letting her sense the objects and understand their power without overwhelming her. Lyra's world shifted. She began to see the possibilities she had never imagined. With Ethan's guidance, she could not only survive but thrive. The piles of scrap she had collected for mere sustenance could now become tools, energy sources, even shelters that were safer and stronger than anything she had ever built. As the days passed, Lyra and Ethan explored further into the ruins together. They discovered broken machines, half-buried vehicles, and strange glowing crystals that resonated with energy. Lyra's senses were sharp, and she guided Ethan through areas that seemed impassable. In return, Ethan taught her how to manipulate the objects, combining them in ways she had never thought possible. One afternoon, as they navigated a particularly dense area of rubble, Lyra sensed something unusual, a vibration unlike any other. She followed it carefully, tendrils probing until she came upon a partially buried structure. It was a ship, massive and ancient, with panels of metal that had once gleamed in the starlight. She ran her tendrils over it, feeling the faint hum of energy still alive within. Ethan's eyes widened. This is incredible," he said. "It could hold the history of your people, maybe even more. We have to see what's inside." Lyra hesitated. She had never ventured into something so large, so unknown. But curiosity and hope drove her forward. Together they worked to clear the debris, and slowly they opened a hatch. The interior was dark, but Lyra could sense compartments, devices, and strange markings. She moved carefully, exploring, feeling the stories of her ancestors in the vibrations and residual energies left behind. Ethan activated a small light, revealing panels filled with symbols, devices that seemed to store information, and pods that glowed faintly. Lyra reached out, touching the surface, and felt the echoes of memory and knowledge embedded in the ship. For the first time in her life, she realized she was not entirely alone. Her people had left traces, and now, with Ethan's help, she could uncover them. By the end of the day, they had explored a portion of the ship and gathered several key objects, understanding that these were the real treasures of the planet. Lyra felt a spark of hope she had never known. Survival was no longer a solitary struggle. It could be a journey of discovery, guided by her instincts and enhanced by the human's knowledge. As night fell over the barren planet, Lyra stood at the edge of the ruins, her tendrils lightly touching the sand, sensing the faint glow of the treasures they had found. Ethan stood beside her, silent but supportive. Together they looked at the horizon, knowing that the world had shifted beneath them. What had once been trash was now treasure, and what had once been despair was now a beginning. Lyra smiled faintly, a gesture rare for her. For the first time, she believed that she could uncover the past, protect her people's legacy, and maybe, just maybe, find a place in a galaxy that had seemed so vast and indifferent. She had survived so long alone, but now, with a companion who understood her world and treasures she could only dream of, she realized that life could be something greater than mere survival. The first light of the alien sun crept over the jagged horizon, casting faint silver shadows across the ruins. Lyra had spent the night near the ancient ship, her tendrils brushing gently over the metal surfaces, feeling the faint pulses of energy that still lingered within. She could sense the history embedded in every panel, every compartment, and the faint echo of her people's voices in the vibrations around her. Ethan had slept nearby, resting among the scattered debris, but by dawn he was already awake, inspecting one of the devices they had recovered the previous day. "Look at this," Ethan said softly, holding up a small glowing cube. It hummed faintly, and when he tapped it, a holographic display appeared showing maps of distant systems, some familiar, some completely unknown. "These are star charts, and they're linked to your people's trade routes. This technology is advanced, far beyond what most civilizations in the sector ever had." Lyra extended a tendril, touching the cube carefully. The vibrations were overwhelming at first, but she adjusted, feeling patterns and flows of energy that told her more than she could see. Her heart, or what passed for it in her species, thrummed with excitement. This was proof that her people had once been explorers, traders, and scholars. They had left this knowledge behind, waiting for someone to rediscover it. Ethan smiled, seeing her reaction. "And you found it. You always had the skill to recognize these treasures, even if you didn't know what they were." For hours, they explored the interior of the ship. Lyra's tendrils glided over consoles and panels, feeling the intricate carvings and sensors. Ethan guided her where he could, explaining what each device might do. Some were simple: energy storage units, tools for repairing machinery. Others were more complex: data cores containing logs, historical records, and technology blueprints. Each discovery made Lyra feel more connected to the ancestors she had never met. The planet that had once seemed so hostile now felt alive with the memory of her people. As they moved deeper into the ship, Lyra felt a subtle vibration that was different from the rest. It was faint but persistent, like a heartbeat trapped within metal. She followed it carefully, her tendrils leading the way. Ethan noticed her movement and followed silently. They arrived at a large chamber partially buried in sand. The walls glowed faintly with embedded crystals, and in the center was a device that looked like a throne or command chair, surrounded by panels filled with unreadable symbols. Lyra hesitated. The vibrations were stronger here, almost alive. She reached out, letting her tendrils brush the surface. Suddenly, a surge of energy pulsed through the chamber. The symbols lit up one by one, responding to her touch. A holographic image appeared above the chair, showing a figure that resembled her species, tall and regal, surrounded by a network of symbols and maps. She felt the emotions embedded in the hologram: pride, sorrow, hope. Her ancestors had recorded messages, instructions, and warnings for those who might survive. Ethan watched in awe. This is incredible. It's like your people prepared for someone like you. They left their knowledge and guidance in case the right person found it. Lyra focused on the hologram, letting the vibrations guide her understanding. She could feel the story of her civilization: the rise, the trade, the war, and finally the collapse. She sensed the wisdom they had accumulated, and the responsibility that now fell to her. For the first time, she felt that her life had a purpose beyond survival. She was not merely a scavenger. She was a keeper of history, a bridge to the lost legacy of her people. Their exploration was interrupted by an unexpected sound: footsteps in the sand outside. Ethan froze, listening. "We're not alone," he whispered. "Someone else is here. Could be scavengers or explorers who want these artifacts for themselves." Lyra extended her tendrils, sensing the movement outside. There were several figures, humanoid but unlike Ethan. Their energy signatures were aggressive, chaotic. Lyra's instincts flared. She turned to Ethan. "We must protect the ship." "These are dangerous," Ethan nodded. He quickly gathered several of the smaller devices they had recovered, placing them strategically near entrances. "We can use these to defend ourselves, at least temporarily," he said. "But we'll need your help." Lyra led the way. Using her heightened senses, she guided Ethan through hidden passages, around weak structures and over unstable floors. The intruders entered the ruins, unaware of the trap set by the girl who had once lived among scraps. When they reached the first line of defense, energy fields activated, startling the scavengers and forcing them to retreat. Lyra's tendrils had detected weaknesses in the sand and metal, allowing them to exploit the environment. The intruders tried again, more cautiously, But Lyra and Ethan were prepared. Improvised barriers, energy pulses, and careful maneuvering allowed them to outsmart the intruders repeatedly. Lyra marveled at how effective her instincts were when combined with Ethan's understanding of technology. For the first time, she felt that she could face danger without fear, not because she was invincible, but because she had knowledge, skill, and an ally she could trust. After hours of tense standoff, the intruders gave up, retreating into the distance. Lyra and Ethan were left standing in the dim light of the ship's interior, exhausted but victorious. Ethan clapped her on the shoulder. "You did amazing. Your instincts, your perception, I've never seen anything like it. Without you, we wouldn't have stood a chance." Lyra's tendrils trembled slightly. She had survived alone for so long, but now she realized that she was stronger when she worked with someone she trusted. The ship was safe, at least for now, and she could finally explore its treasures without fear. The following days were spent cataloging, activating, and understanding the ship's technology. Lyra discovered records of her people's knowledge, engineering schematics, historical logs, and even star maps indicating colonies and outposts that might still exist. She learned about their achievements, the civilizations they had traded with, and the mistakes that had led to their downfall. Each discovery deepened her understanding and pride. She was no longer alone. She carried the legacy of a great people. Ethan continued to guide her, helping her activate energy sources and devices that could assist in survival and exploration. Together, they modified some of the tools to serve immediate needs, powering water purification units, constructing a simple shelter from ship materials, and creating energy lights to replace the faint natural illumination of the planet. Lyra learned quickly, absorbing knowledge like a sponge, her intuition guiding her hands and tendrils. One day, as they worked near a console that controlled a navigation interface, Lyra detected a faint signal, a message transmitted across the stars. She reached out with her tendrils, feeling the vibrations of incoming communication. Ethan activated the console. The message, fragmented and ancient, was a call for survivors, a beacon left by her people to connect with any who had survived the war. Lyra's tendrils quivered with excitement. The legacy of her civilization was not lost. It was waiting to be restored. Ethan looked at her with admiration. "You're incredible, Lyra. You can sense things no one else could. You've saved these treasures and could even restore your people's legacy. The galaxy will know that your civilization existed through you." Lyra felt a surge of emotion she had never experienced before. She was no longer the blind scavenger, surviving among scraps. She was a custodian of history, a bridge between the past and the future. Her senses, once tools for mere survival, were now instruments of discovery and protection. As they prepared to leave the ship for a brief exploration outside, Lyra paused at the entrance. She extended her tendrils, feeling the vibrations of the surrounding landscape. The planet that had seemed hostile was now a canvas filled with potential. She could sense resources, hidden structures, and even faint energy signals from distant ruins. This world was no longer just a place of survival. It was a place of opportunity, waiting for someone brave enough to uncover its secrets. Ethan noticed her pause and smiled. "Ready?" he asked. Lyra nodded, her tendrils brushing against the sand as if saying goodbye to the old way of life. Together they stepped into the open, ready to face whatever the planet and the galaxy might hold. The treasures she had once considered trash were now keys to her people's past, and the foundation for a future she had never dared to imagine. The alien sun rose higher, casting long shadows that danced across the metal ruins. Lyra could feel the energy of the ship behind her, humming softly, alive with the memories and knowledge of her ancestors. She and Ethan moved through the ruins, collecting data, exploring new areas, and preparing to activate the larger systems of the ship. Each step was deliberate, careful, but filled with purpose. By evening, they had unlocked a storage compartment filled with star maps and messages encoded in energy patterns. Lyra sensed the vibrations of the messages, interpreting them as fragments of history and instructions. She realized that these messages could connect her to other survivors, to allies who might help rebuild her people's legacy. Her heart, or what functioned as her emotional center, throbbed with a rare feeling: hope. As night fell, Lyra stood on a small rise outside the ship, the glowing panels illuminating her pale blue skin. Ethan joined her silently, and together they gazed at the stars. Lyra could sense distant vibrations, the subtle hum,